We're four friends with hot takes on food media.
And we're here to review and recap all kinds of food shows in bite-sized seasons.
Plus, virtual potlucks, cooking adventures, and food memes.
Welcome to Pod Appétit Gourmet Takes.
Hi, I'm Amanda.
Hey, it's Justine.
Hey, it's LJ.
And it's me, Meg.
Ooh, hello everybody. Welcome back to Pod Appétit Gourmet Takes. Man, we've got an awesome episode for you today because we are recapping Netflix's 2018 series Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat, starring Chef Samin Nosrat. All this season of Pod Appétit, we've been going through each episode, but now we are going to be talking about the show as a whole. But first, what have we been up to in our home kitchens? Meg, what have you been cooking?
I honestly haven't been cooking anything that exciting or noteworthy, so I thought instead I would talk about an appliance that I have found very useful in the kitchen. So
Are
this
you
is
an appliance?
Yeah, an appliance. So I'm not a big proponent of single-use kitchen appliances because I usually find that I use them once or twice and then forget about them. They don't really ever prove themselves that useful, but
Wow.
I bought the Rapid Egg Cooker by Dash, and this is a little electric egg cooker. It's super simple to use. Not that hard-boiling eggs is really that difficult, but I found this device really useful because you can have a hard-boiled egg in about 13 minutes flat. It's really small and compact. You don't have to boil a whole lot of water. It just uses a hot plate and a steaming element. And I don't know what it is about the method, but the eggs seem to peel really easily, and I've never had a gray yolk once. So I love hard-boiled eggs. I make them often for lunch. I find this very convenient. It's not great for large batch cooking because it can only hold 6 eggs maximum. But if you just want a few hard-boiled eggs, also does soft-boiled, poached, whatever, but I've only used it for hard-boiled. I just love it. It's really convenient and easy to use. So that's my little spiel for that. And I'm not getting paid to say that.
Hashtag not sponsored.
Would it be good for deviled eggs? Because
I think if I were making deviled eggs, I would probably still use the traditional method because you want to make more than 6 deviled eggs, right?
well, ideally, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Everyone can do what they want with deviled eggs. But
Well, that's true. But knowing myself, I love deviled eggs and I eat
too.
a lot of them. So I'd probably make a big batch. But, if you just wanted to cook up 6 eggs and make deviled eggs out of them, it'd be super easy.
that sounds cool.
What about you, Amanda?
Once again, not a lot of anything interesting cooking. I've done a lot of frozen meals, and I will highlight I got delivered Genji Go, which is a Japanese hibachi style local restaurant. They used to have an actual where you would go in just called Genji, and they had the big huge tables where the chefs cooked everything right in front of you. All of those locations have closed, which makes me very sad because I used to go there for every birthday, but they do still have the fast dining version, Genji Go, locally in Columbus. So I got some of that last week, which was really nice and kind of reminded me of the before times.
Japanese food.
When do you think that you're going to start cooking again?
Justine's
I
this
mean,
is all very nice.
No, I mean...
But
No, I mean, you're getting into a new routine and
Right,
stuff.
right.
And then,
Yeah. Part of it, too, is trying to find a new apartment right now. So I feel like when we get settled, I'll get into a better routine of being able to make food. If I'm making something at home, it often, instead of being a full cooking thing, it's I'm making a little bit of rice and then adding some stuff. It's I feel like I'm not necessarily doing a full cooked meal or anything like that because it's just me making something small for myself.
I mean, those are still things, and I think they're valid. I was you cooked rice. I mean,
Okay.
that's an
That's
accomplishment. That is cooking, yeah. And I just don't want to detract away from these small accomplishments that I feel like even other people can relate to,
I mean, yeah, I think it's just I've been doing things like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and
that's cooking.
Yeah. That
Okay.
sounds way better than I ate a frozen TV dinner, you know?
Yeah. I don't know. I tried a new Greek yogurt the other day. I didn't cook it, but like I tried a new one that my brother's been trying to get me to have. I got Noosa lemon, and it was really good. So I guess that's where I don't feel like I'm doing like the full on cooking kind of stuff. I'm just doing like little things and then kind of zhuzhing it up a little bit.
I feel like that is cooking.
Yeah, that's definitely cooking.
I feel like
that's the stuff I want to hear more about, you know?
Yeah. I just don't feel like I'm doing it. I don't know.
I think
But
you
you
are.
are.
I think
It's like you said you don't like improv, but you do improv every time you podcast. You're doing it, Amanda. You're doing it.
look at LJ. LJ's so proud of you.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess I just feel like, because when I'm making rice, it's not like I'm boiling it myself. Like I might be doing like an instant rice thing. But yeah, that's what I've been doing, is more things like that, where it's like something that I can make in the microwave or on the stove, like super fast. And then I just add a few things and make it my own.
But I think that's cooking, and that's improving actually. And it's also it's that's relatable. Like that's what most people are doing, like day to day.
100%. Yeah.
Okay. No,
that's what our listeners are doing.
Yeah.
So that's, I mean, yeah. So I guess what I've made is some rice stuff where I just like make a basic, it's like a 90-second instant rice. And then I add either some, like, sometimes if we have it, I'll add shredded cheese. I usually add some Worcestershire, maybe some Chipotle hot sauce, if I want a little spice. And we have this really good balsamic vinegar that I'll add just like a little bit to just kind of give it that acid and salty taste, and that'll be dinner.
That sounds delicious.
You're applying all the principles of salt, fat, acid, heat.
You are.
I didn't even think about it. I love you guys.
Well, what I made this week was, let me tell you a story. So there's this thing that my dad used to make me when I was a kid. Not just me, like me and my siblings. And it's called mouse pie. And whenever I talk about it, people are like, mouse pie? What? There's mice in a pie? Like, what is this? And basically, it's my dad's idea of a joke because he thinks he's funny. And essentially, there's no mice in the pie, where it's just a cheese and onion pie. But when you make it, you put like a little pastry mouse on the top and you go, this is mouse pie. And everyone's like, oh my God, oh no, I can't possibly eat mouse. And then you cut into it and it's just like cheese and onion. So that's my dad's humour. He made it up, basically. It's not an actual recipe. He made it up when we were kids because it's a food that kids can eat easily. Anyway, I was reminded of it, a couple of weeks ago, and then when it was pastry week on the Bake Off, I was like, I really fancy mouse pie. I know it's like real kids food, but that's what I want. I really want mouse pie and some baked beans. That's what I want. And so I texted my dad. I'd never made it before. I texted my dad and was like, Dad, how do you make mouse pie? Because obviously I can't Google a recipe. He made it up. And he was and this is what came back, guys. It was pastry, top and bottom, with grated cheese and raw onion, egg wash, cook 35 to 40 minutes. And I was like, this is like, what? I was like, A, how much cheese? B, how much onion? What type of cheese? What am I doing with the oven temperature? Like, I need more detail, Dad.
What kind of pastry?
Exactly. I was like, this is like a bake-off technical. Like, what am I doing? And he basically didn't really get back to me in time. He told me to have like one onion, and he was like cheddar, and he was like, you just fill up the pie dish with your onion and cheddar. And I was like, okay, well, I know I only want to make a pie for, like, I don't want loads of leftovers. It's only something I want for one meal. So making it for me and Russ, so I guess I need a roughly this size of pie dish. So I chose a pie dish that I have that's the right size, and then I didn't even make the pastry. Like, I'm like 7 months pregnant. I'm not making pastry right now, so I just bought some store-bought pastry. Stupidly, baby brain, forgot to grease the bloody pie tin, didn't I? Put the pastry in it. And then I chopped up one onion and I put it in a bowl, and then I grated enough cheddar cheese to like what I thought was going to fill it, and just kept grating until it was full. And then I put the pastry on top and put it in. And I guessed when he said 30 to 45 minutes, I was like, well, that's going to be, I don't know what this will be in Fahrenheit, guys, but I think that's going to be about 180 centigrade, because that's basically, in the avoidance of doubt, just put it in at 180, it'll probably be fine. And it was
like 350.
That's right, yeah. And then I put it in, waited for 45 minutes. It looked brown. It looked delicious. We served it up. The bottom got stuck, but we just chipped away at it. It came away. It was all fine, and it was exactly what I wanted. So, not fancy, hilarious technical challenge type instructions, but we got there, and it was a delicious meal. So that was my cooking sort of adventure this time around. How about you, Justine? What have you been making?
Oh man, so I've got a couple dishes that I've made in the past few weeks, but also like a couple of firsts. Yeah, I know. I made spaghetti squash for the first time.
Yes.
Ooh.
I made kale chips for the first time. Those still need some work. And then I also opened pomegranate for the first time.
Oh, yeah, and like bang out the seeds. Yeah.
You never had a pomegranate before?
I've had pomegranate, but I've never like done it myself.
It's so weird.
That's cool. I can do that now. Yay!
Yay, that's good.
Pomegranate is one of those fruits that I really enjoy the flavor of, but they're such a pain in the butt if you don't want to eat the seed. So sometimes I just eat the seed because it's like, whatever. I'm not going to chew around this little thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so 2 dishes that I've made that were yummy. One was from Oshiglow's new dinner cookbook, which I bought when it came out, and it's the black bean skillet, which is just like a really basic like onion, tomato, black bean, and spices, mix it up skillet that takes like, I don't know, 10 to 20 minutes, and then you could just use it for anything, for like wraps, for nachos, for, anything sort of taco-y related, choose your mode of transportation into your mouth sort of thing. It's super yummy. The other thing I made last night was from Make It Dairy Free, and it was their garlic Parmesan pasta. Also something super, super easy of just like 10 cloves of minced garlic, and you saute that off in I use my Dutch oven, and then add in a can of coconut milk and a box of veggie broth, and then that all boils up and you cook the pasta in that, and then add in the Parmesan after when it's like done, because it'll reduce down to the sauce as the pasta cooks. And the Parmesan, of course, I made myself using pepitas instead of cashews this time.
Coconut milk is not where I thought that dish was going, but that sounds really interesting.
Yeah, it makes it creamy, without having to like soak cashews and like blend them up sort of thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. So like I've been having a super yum time.
I feel like I've been enjoying coconut milk recently. I had a coconut milk rice pudding last week that was really good. I did not make it. I purchased it, and it had mangoes on top, so it was very delicious.
Nice. That sounds yum.
Yeah.
Nom, nom, nom,
I've
nom, nom.
legit been craving it today.
Okay, well, to go on to the main part of our show, today we are recapping Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat. I want to start out by quoting Wikipedia and saying, Maura Judkis of the Washington Post called it unlike any other food show on TV, mentioning the high proportion of women and home cooks featured on the show. From Eater, Greg Morabito said Samin was a charming host and applauded her and director Caroline Suh for conceiving a completely new style of culinary TV show. So I want to hear what you guys have in terms of like a response to this or your general takes.
I did not realize that the director was a woman. So that's very cool.
I think as far as the show goes, or overall, like when I step back and think about it, I think it was gorgeously produced. It was really like a love letter to the countries and the elements that they were zooming in on each episode. Like even though it's obviously a visual medium, it felt very sensory. Like you could almost smell and taste the flavors like she was trying on screen because of how they were shot and like the feel of the ingredients. Like I keep thinking back to that focaccia scene. It was like the slow-mo of the like piano fingers on the bread, and it was just like, oh yeah, I can really feel that. And it was just like it was just a very pleasurable experience watching all of those sorts of montages. But also it wasn't just pretty, like it was practical. It was full of like tips and concepts that I think any home cook could take away and like apply to a dish. Like I've already started thinking things like, oh, is there any acid in this dish, or where's the salt element coming in? Do you know what I mean? And like that's got me thinking. So in that way, I would say the show's been a success.
Yeah, the quotes that you shared, Justine, I think what they point to is that it's a different kind of food show. And I agree with that. And I think it's up to the individual viewer whether they find that successful or not, because it's not the most practical show. It doesn't give you recipes or techniques. It gives you very broad principles. And, you know, there's a lot of cooking shows that skew far more towards entertainment, like reality shows like Great British Bake Off, or let's have someone do something silly or do a challenge. So it's more like what you were saying, LJ. It's very beautiful show. I was thinking it's kind of like a mood board of a cooking show. I think that it's very inspirational, and I think that that's the main thrust and purpose of the show. Like, look at how beautiful food is, look at how simple and approachable it can be, and you can do it too. I feel like that's really what this show accomplishes.
I'd say, I guess, practical more in the sense of it's like a framework rather than a how-to, I suppose, is what she was trying to share. But yeah, I agree. That's not necessarily the most helpful, especially if you're like a real novice, I suppose. But yeah.
What I gravitated more towards throughout the entire series, and I know we talked about it, but it was that like travel log and like the lusciousness of that, of experiencing Italy and Japan and Mexico and those locations and the people of those locations. I think that's a big part of it too, is the people. Like, they really stand out to me. And
I love those.
Yeah, like the personalities of like the old woman who's teaching her the pesto in Italy, or the little old man who's like making the soy sauce and he's all about his microorganisms, or like the people that are doing the honey in the Mexico one, like, you know, that they've been doing all of the, I mean, even the bees were like their own character in that episode.
Yeah. I feel like to what you're saying, what the show really drives across that I found that I like is like the respect of food, like the respect you give to food, like you get back.
Yes.
I think on the people front, I agree with you, Amanda. I loved the people that she was showcasing in those travelogue portions. Like, it really stood out to me how so many of them were older, like older generations, and like that's how so many people learn to cook, right? Knowledge gets passed down like through the generations. And actually so many of them were, not all of them, but so many of them were older women as well. And like so many people get taught things from their like grandmas and mothers and stuff. And I just feel like she really, to your point about respect as well, Justine, like she really like hammered home, I think, the importance of tapping into those centuries of knowledge, like whilst you still can. It was just really fascinating and beautiful. I really enjoyed that approach to learning about the elements.
Yeah, absolutely. She really frames people as the best resource you can have for cooking. Ask questions, learn by someone's side in the kitchen. I did really enjoy the people and the communal aspect of food and learning.
Yeah, like the family-style meals, I think, were a highlight for me as well at the end of each episode. Like bringing everything together.
That we're going into our next episode as a potluck, and we're doing it a little differently than we have in the past, where we all know what the other person is making instead of it being like a blind surprise. And I'm super looking forward to being able to actually message you guys with questions instead of feeling like I'm on my own.
Right. That's good. I don't know how you guys felt about Samin as a host, but I thought and we have picked up on this a little bit in our episode specific episodes, but when she's in student mode, she was so enthusiastic and hungry with curiosity, and for me that was almost like infectious, because as she's on screen getting excited to learn more, I found myself getting excited to learn more, even more than I was at the beginning of the show, just from her attitude and how she was absolutely delighted with what people were saying.
Yeah, I agree with you definitely there. The first time I watched the series through at the beginning of pandemic, it's not that I left the show with like recipes that I wanted to make, but more so like an attitude that I wanted to have.
That's kind of what I was getting at about it being inspirational. It doesn't necessarily give you the step-by-step instructions, but it really is about making food approachable, encouraging you to try something in the kitchen. I think you used the right word, LJ, that it's very infectious. You just really get jazzed up after you've watched an episode.
Get jazzed. Does everybody have a favorite episode of the 4?
Well, Salt was definitely my favorite because Japan, duh.
Yeah.
And Salt is quite interesting. So anything Japan related, of course, appealed to me. Also, since I had been to one place where they went in the show, so it's kind of like, hey, I've been there on the Japan episode. I mean, I have been to Mexico as well, but not any of the places that they went in the acid episode. And of course, the bees. That was my favorite part of the acid episode.
My favorite, I think, for similar reasons, was the fat episode, because I've been to Italy several times and I've always enjoyed the culture they have about food over there, and I love fat. I can't get enough of it. So I just think that it was, and all the beautiful Italian food, and that nonna making the pasta. Oh, it was just pesto even. It was just so good.
My favorite episode is also Salt, because I just keep coming back to thinking about like the person who makes the miso and the person who makes the soy sauce, and just how some of the way that they're making it is kind of like magic.
Oh, yeah.
I like that. It's the way they've been doing it for so long in their traditions, and it's just like it's a part of them. And I don't know, those parts like really spoke to me.
I did especially enjoy the soy sauce maker. It just really spoke to the Japanese ethos in a lot of ways, and I felt that I could relate with my own experience of learning from people when I lived in Japan. And the soy sauce maker entrusting the microorganisms to create the soy sauce, it was so sweet. And it was also just, it really spoke to the heart of some Japanese ideas about being thankful for nature. And I would classify microorganisms as nature doing its thing, or I went fishing in a creek when I lived there, and they had a little shrine to the fish, and the group I was with had a little prayer for the fish before we cooked them. So it really resonated with me personally, the soy sauce maker especially.
Yeah, I like that. I like hearing that, and I don't know, part of me is like, I want to look more into that.
And I feel like there was a similar attitude going on actually with the bees in Mexico, but also, when they were in Italy at the pork farm and talking about, the animal with such respect and making sure they're looked after in their lifetime, there was just that theme of respecting what it is that you're cooking with, that, and then that link between, man and nature, using nature for food. I think it was interesting to show how the different countries kind of do that in different ways, but like that's at the heart of everything that they do. And I really loved that.
My favorite overall episode, in the same vein as LJ, is Italy, because I've been there, and I know I talked on that episode in particular how it just made me miss it and like want to go back. We've also talked about, I think like after that was probably acid, because my revelation of like, I really love acid, and I didn't realize how much I do until then. But yeah, just the Italy of it all. I can't, I want to go back, guys. I want to go back and eat delicious food and no one judge me for stuff in my face.
I feel like the Italy episode was especially worshipful in its production. I feel like there were more sweeping vistas of Italy than of any of the other countries. I don't know, maybe.
I think it's
maybe
because
not, but...
Samin actually lived there for a while.
Yeah.
I thought that. Yeah.
Well, maybe, but that's also, it's not up to her. It's up to production. She's being directed. There's producers.
That's
you know.
true. That's true. That's true.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break now for a commercial. But when we come back, we'll be talking about any criticisms of the shows and Samin's cookbook and podcast. So join us when we come back. And we're back. So I feel like something I'm hearing from you guys is that we aren't really talking about the 4th episode, Heat.
The episode that shall not be named. Yeah.
Or at all.
Yeah.
What's the deal?
It was definitely my least fave because I think we said a lot about it in our Heat episode, but I felt personally it was focusing less on Heat and more as a recap of how everything ties together. Like, we didn't really learn a lot about Heat really in the show. And I also wish they'd gone to another country again and done a travelogue style episode. I just feel like that was really a gaping hole in the series and like made that episode fall, I guess, more flat than the others.
Exactly that. I really missed the travelogue aspect of it because that was probably my favorite, just seeing the beautiful scenery, the beautiful ingredients. It was definitely sorely missing from the last episode.
I feel like there could have even been a travelogue portion of it or like feel to it, even if it was still in California and in the Berkeley area. I feel like there could have been more about the local food and doing Heat there or something, but it basically was like Chez Panisse and her house, a random grocery store. Like, you know, it wasn't even like, here's this kind of local market and here's how, the way that it was in like in the Japan episode and in the Mexico episode, where when they went to buy things at a market, it was like part of the culture and what was going on and still got in with the theme. Whereas it felt like all of the grocery store little trips and like market trips in the 4th one was just like, here's the difference between these salts. Here's a thing about produce. Here's a thing about meat, as opposed to like the cultural side of it. And
there was no heritage in there like there was in the rest.
It didn't make the US feel very grand. It didn't have that like sweeping shot. Like, it kind of made me feel like, well, you're not at these places, you're here, stuck here.
Which is such a shame, because speaking as someone who doesn't live in the US, like, there's so much heritage to draw on in the US. Like, how people in the US have used fire for decades to cook food. Like, you know, you've got cowboys, you've got, you know, Native Americans, you've got, like people have been using fire since the beginning of time, and America included. So like, you could have tapped into that, I think, a bit more. And, you know, why has Chez Panisse got this open fire? Like, where's that come from? What's the, I don't know. It was a missed opportunity. It felt like I don't know whether it was a rushed episode or they were trying to do too many things in that episode by tying the whole series together as well.
It really did feel like it just assumed that the audience was American, and it was like, all right, back to default settings, back to America, and we don't need to explore it with the same rigor that we explored the other countries. It did feel like a missed opportunity.
Yeah, I feel that. Do you guys have any other criticisms from any other of the episodes?
Yeah, so I think the reason why I couldn't put Salt in as one... I did enjoy Salt a lot more than the Heat episode, for sure, but the one other big criticism I have of the series is that in that episode, in the Salt episode, we got that westernized version of a Japanese take on a dish by Samin back at home for some reason. And for me, that was just completely unnecessary, and it just stuck out like a sore thumb. Like, I would much rather have seen her doing what she did in Italy or in Mexico, which is cook the dishes that she was learning from people in Japan. Like, I don't understand why we had that random recipe in there. For me, I just felt like it was a weird decision to make.
Yeah, I agree that I know we discussed it in the salt episode, but then after having watched Acid and it went back to essentially what the fat was, where it was all in one place and all with the people of that country, it still feels to me a little bit like it's short shrift to Japan and to Eastern cooking.
Yeah. Did you guys know that the Yucatan decision was kind of a last minute decision because they wanted to go to Middle East, but
Oh, I did not know that.
yeah, she originally wanted to do more of like her
Iranian,
where she's from. Yeah, they weren't allowed to go over there, so they had to last minute pick another one, and they came off, like, okay, where could we go that also could have these elements of acid? Sorry, I said heat earlier. I meant acid. Mm-hmm. And so they had to, like, come up with, like, places and things they could talk about. And actually, the guy who eats the salsa with them, because they were like, oh, I guess we got to do a salsa thing, but who are we going to get? That's one of, like, their local PAs.
Oh, really?
Behind the scenes. Yeah, no, that's interesting. And it's interesting knowing that, because to me, and I don't know what they had planned for an Iranian version of that episode, but the acid episode as set in Mexico just felt a lot more aligned to how they'd started off the season in Italy than the salt episode. I think the salt episode was trying to do a lot of that, but then they had that weird oddity that was the Western recipe that they decided to stick in. I didn't get the vibe that acid had to be like completely thought of in a rush. It felt like part of the season, and that, it made sense to me, like Mexico as a representation of acid. So that's very interesting.
I just think the last thing, and I know I mentioned it in our previous episode, but I kind of wish it was 5 episodes instead of 4.
Yeah, actually, you're right.
I just still, as I've like thought about it more, and I've started, I know we'll talk about it more shortly, but listening to her podcast a lot this past week, it just felt like it did need that extra like separation of here are the 4 and then here's all of it together. It just feels like that would have been production wise, I think, a little bit more cohesive.
Yeah, mm-hmm. I think the same. I think they could have done a better job of tying those elements together, like throughout the series, like showing how they work together, why you need all of them, like more tips, I guess, on how to ensure that you get all of them. Like what are the things you can ask yourself? What are the ideas that you can bring into a different situation on making sure that you've got all of those elements? I guess the book, obviously, that's a textbook, and it lays that all out in a lot more detail, like stating what each element does for a dish and, all that kind of stuff. But I know that you can't have a show that is like a textbook, because that would not be that interesting. But I do feel like they could have incorporated some of that kind of explanatory stuff a bit better, and just tying the kind of the main thesis of the book in a bit more.
I did really enjoy this show, as we've been saying, but now that I've started to read some of the book, it became very clear to me that the book really is the medium to get across what Samin wants to teach.
Yeah.
Okay, let's deep dive about the book then now.
Seeing it as an adaptation, the show, it's maybe not the most successful adaptation because there is so much content in the book. It's just so much to distill. Like we said, it essentially is a textbook, and a scientific textbook at that. It really gets into the science of food, the science of different ingredients. So I almost hate to say it, but I kind of like the show a little bit less after having started the book, because now I see really what Samin's vision was, and the show kind of feels like a literal too long didn't read.
I think I've said to you guys a bunch of times, I'm like, I'm not really a fan of the book. I don't know. I got it earlier in the year before we even decided to cover this show, and like I kind of immediately returned it because I think it's just basically who I am, and especially someone who needs to adjust recipes often, and someone who doesn't eat meat. Like the way that it's structured isn't helpful for me because it's more free form, and I don't know, just like the way that the you can't, I don't know. To me, I'm like, I can't really find what I'm looking for easily. I don't know if
That's the whole
anybody else.
conceit of the book, though. And unfortunately, it sounds like it just didn't resonate with you because it's not a recipe book. And it really does state its thesis in the beginning. It says, I'm going to teach you these principles. And once you know these principles, you won't even need a recipe. So it's really not trying to be a recipe book.
And I think that's probably where a lot of people's disappoint. You buy it thinking, oh, this is a cookbook. And actually, that's not what it's not trying to be that, you know? And I think when you take it at what it's trying to be, I found it, I mean, I like learning about the geeky side of food and like the science behind it. So I haven't read the whole book, but I've certainly flicked through and read a bit more in the detail of the elements that I was interested in. And I guess I like what the message she's trying to convey, which is that you don't need recipe books for cooking necessarily if you understand some basic concepts about how to build a delicious dish. And these are those concepts, and this is why, and this is the science, and all of this stuff. And I just feel like when you compare it to the show a bit, I think I'm more on Meg's side. Like, the show didn't bring that out enough for me at all. It was just like, here's a love letter to fat, here's a love letter to salt, here's a love letter to acid, and here's how to buy all that stuff in a shop. And we sometimes use heat. Like, it was like, I don't know, it just felt a bit like not thought through and not really. It was just and by the way, I make my friends cook when they come around. That was the other thing. Yeah. But do you know what I mean? I just feel like it fumbled the ending, didn't bring out that like main concept enough, in my opinion, having now seen where she was going with the book.
As we discovered last time, improvisation cooking really makes me anxious. And so, like, I'll admit, I didn't feel like reading a textbook. And so I skimmed through it more and looked at some of the recipes, and like, I understand the concept of it, but I think more along the lines of Justine, I like to be able to kind of see, okay, what are like the elements of this? And I'm happy to read more, but I want a recipe to start and to figure out what would work and what wouldn't for me, more so that I'm just a picky eater. So just kind of looking at that. Now, I will say, like, skimming through, I think like some that we talked about in the heat, like our episode on the heat episode, the illustrations are really interesting, and some of like the charts. And I liked that there literally were like pop-up book style, like fold out pages, like things like that. I thought were very interesting.
So detailed as well.
Yeah, so detailed. And I was like looking at one of my favorite illustrations was like the world of acid. It's like this whole chart of Europe, North America, Middle East, and like breaking down all the different kinds of acids that are used in those different regions. And so like I found that really interesting. But I guess for me, I'm more like, okay, sure, I'll look at that, but I don't know if I'm going to sit down and start on page 1 and read through and do the concepts without me getting, I mean, bored a little bit, but also just kind of like frustrated. And I think for me, where I start to feel like this is so far beyond concepts that I feel like I'm good at, and then it goes into my whole self-esteem cooking spiral, and it's difficult. Like, yeah, I think it's harder for me in that aspect. But based on, like, if I'm looking at what she was trying to do, I think the points that you made, Meg, and that you made, LJ, like, really make sense of, like, she is trying to impart this wisdom that she's found and try to help people. And the whole idea is like, you can cook at home and you don't, I understand that. But for me, I'm like, must have recipe.
This is interesting because I was thinking about who this show is good for, and maybe who the intended audience would be. And I wonder if this conversation that we're having about the book, like, certainly I feel like the book is better for a home cook who has some foundational knowledge, like not necessarily been formally taught in any way, but kind of has a feel for, feels pretty confident if they've got a recipe that they can pick that up and know enough to be able to produce a good result at the end of it without feeling intimidated by that. I feel like if you're learning any skill, when you're at the novice level, you need more instructions to start with, right? You can't just go straight into frameworks. You have to get a feel for following something step by step first. And that's not what this book is. So,
it's intimidating.
Yeah. And I feel like it's something that once you've got a bit of experience of like what different recipes can do when you follow them, then you're maybe ready to learn more about the sort of thing that Samin's presenting and in this kind of thesis of this book, which is actually you can create, if you understand some basic concepts, you don't need the instructions anymore.
I'm like, don't take away my instructions.
I need those instructions though.
But I think it's like, and some people just like the instructions. They don't want to throw them away. And I get that. Like, I like following a recipe, like with the best of them. But like sometimes I feel like I've followed enough recipes in my time now that actually it's quite nice to know the principles that sit behind good recipes, maybe develop my own recipes and that kind of thing. And I don't mean that in like a snobby way. I just think it's how you learn any skill. Like, I think you get to a certain level before you're ready for like the next step, because trying to do everything too soon, you'll feel, like you said, Amanda, intimidated, like it's too much.
We're talking about the cookbook. I don't know how, I know Justine has listened to some of the podcasts. I listen to most of the home cooking podcast. I have like 3.5 episodes that I haven't fully listened to yet. I found that I really, like, if I were looking at like the three media forms of Samin, my favorite was the podcast, then the show, then the cookbook for me. Because I feel like all the intimidation is taken out in the podcast to me, because she is able to talk directly to the people and you get to hear her humor, and she talks about places where she's messed up. And I think in our previous iteration of Pod Appétit, like that relatability, it really hit home for me when she's like, oh, well, I wanted to try this recipe. And then, somehow it tasted like liver. And everyone I talked to said, that's not what it's supposed to taste like. So I had to like completely restart. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, she is human. Like, I don't know, like compared to the cookbook in particular, it feels like a lot more like, oh, okay, even though she is this James Beard award-winning cook and like, she does all of these amazing things, she is still trial and erroring.
Right.
Along with the rest of us. And also hearing her talk about, throughout the pandemic, it's hard. And sometimes I just want to make a boxed mac and cheese dinner, or I'm eating popcorn for lunch. And I'm like, oh, hey, I do that. Like, I do that too. And it just like that relatability, I really, really loved in the podcast. Meg and LJ, did you guys have a chance to listen to the podcast at all?
Yeah, I've listened to 4 episodes. I picked and chose. I saw which guests I knew and loved. So I listened to the episode with Nadia Hussein and Tony Porowski and Jason Mantzoukas. And then I also listened to the most recent episode, which was mostly about Halloween candy, which was really fun.
Ooh, I haven't heard
that was an excellent
yet.
episode. I'm really enjoying the podcast as well. And I do feel like
it's much better than ours.
Excuse me. We are both nominees for the Discover Pod Awards.
Which will be out and released the day that this episode comes out.
Yeah, so we'll see if we're winners or not.
Imagine. I just can't imagine winning over Samin. That's
I know,
mental.
it's kind of hilarious to be pitted against her.
I was talking to Justine yesterday and I was like, no, this is literally where like, it's a freaking honor to be nominated, and there's like,
and nobody takes that lightly. Yeah, exactly.
There's no lip service there.
No,
please don't make us win because that's insane and isn't true.
Yeah, if we won, we'd be like, can we dedicate this award to Samin?
We're not worthy. You deserve it, you guys. It's ours. Take what's yours.
Okay, you're right, Meg.
Sorry,
right.
Meg. Continue.
No, you're right. She does have a better podcast. So, no, I do really enjoy this. It seems like maybe the most authentic look at her personality, although it's hard to say for sure. But it's so approachable. It's just really fun and personable. What you're saying, Justine, about how she is almost having a conversation as much as you can with a podcast and not have direct feedback from your listeners. But listeners call in with their questions. It's literally the audio of their voice, and then they answer very specific questions about food, like, what do I do with all this cheese?
Make mouse pie.
Make mouse pie. I do definitely find it more entertaining than instructional, which is totally fine. I love listening to entertaining podcasts, but the questions sometimes are so specific that it's hard to make the answers universal, you know. But I love Samin as a host, and I love her co-host, Rishi. His puns are the best.
Oh my God.
I love him.
Every time she's like, I'm going to kill you, I just laugh so hard.
This podcast, it makes me miss commuting, because I was like, this would be my commuting podcast.
That's what it's been for me this past 2 weeks. It's been my commute podcast to and from work. Oh.
I don't know if did any of you guys did any of you guys listen to the West Wing Weekly? Because that's where I know Rishi from, because he was a host on that. And I listened to that, and yeah, he's great.
Josh Molina is the first guest, because my OCD makes me listen in order, and I love Josh Molina, and it was fun to hear him talk about latkes.
Yeah, no, I'm also a fan of the podcast. I think, I'm trying to think, like, it's a toss-up for me. I mean, look, don't get me wrong. I feel like I don't want people to feel like we've trashed the TV show and said that it's not great. Like, I really enjoyed watching the TV show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's just some things that, you know, constructive criticism that we would like to throw out there. And I love Samin, but I love Samin in, you know, the visual medium. I love her as a podcast, and I really enjoy the bits that I've seen in her book. I really respect her thoughts, and I'm ready for the framework. So that's great. But I do think it's just one of those things, right? Like, sometimes you're writing a cookbook for everyone. Sometimes you're writing a cookbook for people at certain stages in their cooking journeys. There's nothing wrong with that, I suppose. It's just, you know, if that's what you're going for, you just have to recognize that people will come at it from a certain point in their process, right? Yeah.
So as we're wrapping up Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat, I've got 3 questions, which I feel like hopefully maybe we could ask of each show that we cover. First of all, what do you think of the host of the show, Samin Nosrat, as a cooking show host?
I love her.
I give her 10 microorganisms out of 10.
Yeah, she's great. She has that infectious passion for cooking. She's openly curious and very knowledgeable at the same time. I feel like all of these qualities really combine for a very engaging host, and she is just straight up engaging. She's very cheerful. She's very friendly. I think it's a nice personality in every medium we've seen her, the show, the podcast. I really enjoy her as a host.
What embodies it for me is when I shared one of our episodes on Facebook, my friend Grant was like, oh my God, I have such a crush on Samin.
Yeah. You do fall in love with her a little bit, don't you?
Yeah, it's like her enthusiasm and passion, not just for the cooking, but like the food and just like being able to eat different foods and try different things. I find it infectious. In the best way possible, not in a COVID way.
Yeah, I love Samin in the fact that if she did like another cooking show, I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna watch it.
Yeah,
you know,
I would.
So pretty much anything she hosts, I would be game. Sign me up.
I think that's a good litmus test. Would you follow them to another show? And I definitely would with Samin.
Oh, for
if
sure.
she came out with another one, I'd instantly be like, guys, we gotta cover it.
Yeah.
Okay, so who do you think the audience is for Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat, the show? We said Americans.
Yes.
No, I think I can watch
when
it.
I said that, what I meant
allowed.
was I think that they incorrectly made their default setting the American perspective. Is more what I was trying to say.
Speaking as a non-American that watches a lot of American stuff, most American shows are like that, but that doesn't mean that we don't enjoy them. We can get past that. We're just used to it. Actually, the show, unlike the book, which we've talked about, the book is definitely aiming at a certain level. I think this is a good show for anyone interested in food, really, from people who are the average kind of home cook to professionals to novices, because I think there's a lot. I mean, I don't want to put words in Amanda's mouth because she's a self-identified novice, but I just think it's beautiful and it's gorgeous, and if you're interested in food in any way, you'd find something to love about the show. I think it's accessible from that perspective.
I also think the audience can be people who enjoy traveling and trying food in different places. Like, I really think in the first 3 episodes in particular, as we've discussed, I think that is a key thing, because that's something that, like, 3 out of the 4 of us, like, our favorite episode had to do with because we went to that place, like, and it had a bit of a nostalgia factor. But I just feel like in general, if you are somebody who enjoys watching travel shows also, I think this would qualify. And there's plenty of, like, the food and travel that, like, combine, like with Anthony Bourdain, R.I.P. and other things through, like, I definitely feel like even if you were just to watch, like, you like watching the Travel Channel and you enjoy food, this would be a good show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To that also, and to reflecting on the quote I said in the beginning, I think it's also important of watching media that reflects yourself. So watching women chefs and home cooks. Most of the shows that you see, like, on Food Network are hosted by men.
Right.
So
I think also that there's a lot of women of color in these episodes.
Yeah.
So lastly, would you recommend this show?
Yeah.
On 3, 2, 1. Yes.
100%.
I think we're all in agreement. Yes, we would definitely recommend
There's no
this show.
surprise there.
100p.
No.
Okay, well, that was all like stirring conversation. We're going to switch and never talk about it again. No, No, next week we do have our potluck episode. But first, we're going to see what's on our back burner today. And what's on our back burner is the Streamy Nominations. Ooh,
Streamies.
The Streamy Nominations were announced, and nominated for Show of the Year was Binging with Babish.
Oh, well done, Babish.
Good job, Babish.
Good job.
Yay. Now, going into the categories, the nominations for Best Food Channel are Alex French Guy Cooking, Babish Culinary Universe, How to Cook That, Joshua Weissman, and Tabitha Brown, specifically her TikTok.
I watch 2 of those. I watch Babish and I watch Alex French Guy Cooking. I just love his accent. But yeah, but also his content is really interesting as well. I've never watched the other 3 though.
Really?
Yeah.
I know Meg and I watch How to Cook That.
Yep, I've watched Babish and How to Cook That, and I took a quick peek at all the rest of the nominees just to see what they had going. They all seem really entertaining. I think that maybe the through line here is personality. Everyone has something about them that is just really engaging, and maybe that's what they were looking for.
I know, like, our listeners are big fans of Joshua Weissman, but I'm sorry, I can't watch it because the editing is it's too much for my senses.
I've only seen Babish out of these.
How to Cook That is really fun. The host will sometimes take food trends or viral food memes and try to recreate them. Sometimes she debunks cooking hacks or cooking tips. She's really entertaining to watch, and I think she's Australian. I might be wrong about that, but okay, Australian. So she has an entertaining accent to boot, and I guess I'd classify her as a home cook. I don't think that she's a chef, but she's extremely knowledgeable. She also has tips for fixing stuff that you might have messed up. There's a great episode about how to fix cake disasters.
Yeah.
I found her really entertaining.
So when do the awards happen?
Sunday, December 13th.
All right.
Well, I'll be rooting for Babish.
Babish. I think he's a shoo-in. All right, so now I'm going to go on to our shout outs. First of all, we just want to thank everybody who A, nominated us, and B, are voting for us, or past tense, voted for us for the Discover Pods Awards. It's crazy.
Yeah. Mind blowing.
So amazing. It was such a surprise. We were like, what?
It's insane. I was talking to some friends about this last night, and they were like, yeah, how did that happen? I'm like, I don't know.
People listen to us. Like, actual people have us in their ears. Right now.
Right now. Okay, some of those people. So, we had a soup battle on Instagram and Facebook. Thank you to all those who commented. Mary, Peter, the Invisible Woman Podcast, and Desi Distractions Podcast. Thank you for Vibrant Visionaries Podcast for recommending your favorite cooking shows. Thank you very much. Oh man, and also we had a lot of polls on Twitter in the past 2 weeks. Thank you to John Walton for responding with the overall winner of It Depends on if you can put your friends to work at your dinner party. He said it depends on the type of party.
Very true.
We had a hot poll of what's the best chocolate, and thank you to everyone who answered, with the final winner being milk. Shout out to the Edmonton tourists who said that people lie when they say dark chocolate is best. Oof.
My mom would disagree with you.
It was a tight race.
I voted milk chocolate. So
I did too.
Yeah, winner.
I love white chocolate so much.
Dark chocolate. Okay. NostalgiaFiles Podcast wanted us to know that they like candy corn much less as an adult, which was a very civil answer compared to most of the love it or hate it comments we got.
Wait, where do we all stand?
I've never had candy corn.
Wow.
I love it.
We don't have it in the UK.
It's terrible. Don't do it.
I like maybe one candy corn, and then I'm done.
One singular corn.
One singular.
My coworker and I had a whole little bowl in between us that we ate in the past week.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Yeah. Okay, lastly, thank you to shout-outs from Drunk Dish Podcast, Nerdy Bitches Podcast, Book of Lies Podcast, You Totally Made That Up Podcast, and Mouse and Weens Podcast. We appreciate you guys spreading the word about us. So thank you all very much. This week we don't have a review again, but shout out to Sean Gibbs on Twitter for recommending us to a friend, and everybody be more like Sean. Well, thank you for joining us this week. Next time on the podcast, it'll be our final episode of this season, and each of us will be bringing a dish that we've made from salt, fat, acid, heat to our virtual potluck. See you then. Thanks for listening to Pod Appétit Gourmet Takes.
We'd love to hear from you, so find us on Twitter and Instagram at pod_appétit.
And on Facebook at Pod Appétit Podcast.
You can also email us at podappetitpodcast@gmail.com and find all of our episodes on our website, podappetitpodcast.com.
Are you into history that's strange, weird, bizarre, creepy, and crazy?
Maybe even spooky and scary with some monsters and mystery sprinkled in?
Then You Totally Made That Up is the podcast for you. It's just like the name says. We tell you stories that are so unbelievable, they sound like someone must have totally made them up.
Here's the thing though, we don't focus on legends and lore. Our tales are filled with names and dates and all the facts we can find, so they're true stories, even when things try to take a supernatural, paranormal turn.
We've been known to bust myths on occasion, but mostly, we just have a good laugh at all the things that can't and can be explained.
Check us out on all your favorite podcast platforms and look for new episodes on Thursdays. We come at you bi-weekly with occasional bite-sized bonus episodes in between.
You can also find us on Twitter at YTMTU Podcast and on Instagram at You Totally Made That Up.